What's behind you doesn't matter. The Cannonball Run wasn't just another car comedy. It was reckless, dangerous, and born out of real law-breaking chaos. What looked like slapstick on screen often hid real disasters, drunken improvisation, and stunts that could have ended careers, or worse. This wasn't Hollywood polish. This was a film where scripts were thrown out, actors showed up intoxicated, and federal investigators nearly shut it all down. Today, we're hitting the gas on 20 weird facts about the Cannonball Run. Stick around, because the bonus fact at the end is so strange, even fans of the franchise don't believe it's real. Buckle up, because we're about to race straight into madness. 1. Jackie Chan's American debut went wrong. When Jackie Chan burst onto American screens in the Cannonball Run, it should have been his big moment. Instead, Hollywood tripped over itself. The credits labeled him Japanese, ignoring the fact that Jackie was proudly Chinese. For him, it wasn't just a mistake, it was an insult. He later said that the label felt like a dismissal of his entire culture. But Jackie didn't let it stop him. He still threw himself into dangerous stunts, performed with blistering precision, and delivered comic timing without needing many lines. The tragedy? Much of his action was cut, deemed too intense for a lighthearted comedy. What audiences didn't know was that these few scenes planted the seed for Jackie's future domination of American cinema. It wasn't a breakout. It was a preview of a legend Hollywood wasn't ready for. 2. Farah Faucet didn't know it was. A comedy Farah Faucet signed on to the Cannonball Run thinking it was a slick action film with romantic undertones. She studied her lines, asked about motivation, and picked outfits to match her character's supposed emotional arc. Then she showed up to set and saw Dean Martin stumble in as a drunk priest cracking jokes about communion wine. That's when reality hit. This wasn't serious, it was chaos wrapped in car chases. Faucet later admitted she didn't even realize it was a comedy until she watched the final cut with an audience. The crowd erupted in laughter during moments she thought were meant to be heartfelt. What she brought to the movie was genuine confusion, and somehow that made her performance even better. It wasn't acting. It was real bewilderment captured forever on film. 3. Bert Reynolds called it a career mistake. At the peak of his fame, Bert Reynolds could do no wrong. Fresh off Smokey and the Bandit, he was Hollywood's biggest draw. He didn't need another car movie, but when his friend Hal Needam asked and the paycheck came massive, Reynolds shrugged. Why not? Later, he called it one of the worst decisions of his career. Reynolds admitted he barely read the script, skipped rehearsals, and treated the shoot like a vacation with cameras rolling. When he saw the final cut, he hated it. But audiences loved it. The film grossed over $70 million, cementing itself as a cult classic. For Reynolds, it wasn't a performance to be proud of. It was proof that sometimes chaos wins, even if the star himself wishes it didn't. 4. The ambulance was a real Cannonball vehicle. That big Dodge ambulance in the Cannonball Run wasn't just a prop, it was history on wheels. Brock Yates and Hal Needam had driven that exact van in the real Cannonball race, disguised as an emergency vehicle complete with fake patients. Their plan? Outrun police, cross state lines, and never get stopped. Who would pull over an ambulance? It worked until the engine blew near Palm Springs. Years later, they brought the same ambulance to the film set, cleaned it up, and gave it to Reynolds as his on-screen ride. For audiences, it was a gag. For the filmmakers, it was a trophy from their outlaw past. It wasn't set dressing. It was a battle-scarred survivor of an illegal race, resurrected for Hollywood glory. 5. Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. were drunk on set. When audiences saw Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. as bickering priests with cocktails in hand, they weren't really acting. They were living it. The Rat Pack legends spent much of the shoot tipsy or completely gone. They showed up late, forgot lines, and improvised entire scenes. Director Hal Needam didn't fight it. He leaned in. One take reportedly had Sammy slurring a prayer so badly it had to be re-recorded later. Dean? He just poured another drink and kept rolling. What audiences didn't know was that these chaotic, half-drunk performances became the beating heart of the film. It wasn't method acting, it was survival, and it gave the Cannonball Run its unpredictable, intoxicating energy. 6. The jet scene wasn't legal. That jaw-dropping Learjet flying low over a narrow road? It wasn't a model, it wasn't special effects. It was real. The production flew an actual jet under FAA radar without a single permit. They had one chance to get it right. One take, and they barely pulled it off. When federal officials discovered what happened, it wasn't treated like a stunt. It was treated like a crime. Investigations were launched, warnings issued, and director Hal Needam reportedly begged his way out of potential charges. What audiences thought was just another outrageous gag was actually an act of aviation anarchy. It wasn't a movie trick. It was a brush with federal prison hidden behind the roar of jet engines. 7th, a stunt accident changed Hollywood safety forever. Not all of the Cannonball Run's chaos ended in laughter. During a scene involving an Aston Martin, stunt woman Heidi von Beltz was riding passenger. The car slammed into a truck. Her seatbelt hadn't been installed. She survived, but was left permanently paralyzed. The aftermath sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Lawsuits followed. The Directors Guild rewrote rules. No last-minute stunt changes. Mandatory seatbelts in all vehicles, and stricter safety oversight. What audiences saw was a fleeting crash scene. What the industry saw was a devastating reminder of how dangerous improvisation could be. It wasn't just a movie mishap. It was a tragedy that rewrote the rules of an entire industry. 8. Roger Moore played James Bond illegally. Roger Moore didn't officially play James Bond in the Cannonball Run. Instead, he played Seymour Goldfarb Jr., a man who thought he was James Bond. He wore tuxedos, drove an Aston Martin DB5, and introduced himself with the classic Bond cadence. It was parody, but the real Bond producers weren't laughing. They were furious. They couldn't stop it legally, but they moved quickly afterward, contractually banning all future Bond actors from spoofing the character. That made the Cannonball Run the first and last time a real Bond actor played 007 for laughs. For Moore, it was pure fun. For the Bond estate, it was an embarrassment. What looked like a playful wink on screen was, in reality, a licensing war in disguise. 9. Real cops accidentally crashed the chute Las Vegas was supposed to provide controlled chaos. Instead, it almost turned into a real shootout. While filming a wild chase scene, complete with sirens, screeching tires, and fake weapons, the production forgot one key thing: permits. Local police saw the mayhem and thought it was real. They stormed in, lights flashing, weapons drawn. Actors froze, crew panicked. For a tense few minutes, the Cannonball Run became a genuine police standoff. Only after frantic explanations did the officers back down. No arrests, but plenty of warnings. What audiences saw as comedy was actually seconds away from disaster. It wasn't make-believe cops versus robbers. It was Hollywood versus real law enforcement, and nobody thought it was funny at the time. 10th, Jackie Chan's action was cut for being too good. Jackie Chan didn't waste a second of his short screen time. He scaled walls, dove through glass, and delivered fight choreography that stunned everyone on set. The problem? It was too good. American editors cut several of his best sequences, afraid his lightning-fast martial arts didn't fit in a slapstick comedy. For Jackie, it was devastating. His U.S. debut sabotaged by being too talented. But what remained still left an impression. For many Americans, it was the first time they saw Jackie's unique blend of comedy and combat. What audiences didn't realize was that those few minutes planted the seeds for a new era of action. It wasn't a wasted role. It was the beginning of Jackie Chan breaking into the West. 11. The script was practically non-existent. Most movies begin with a locked script. The Cannonball Run didn't even pretend. Dialogue was scribbled on napkins, rewritten in parking lots, and improvised on the spot. Farah Faucet later admitted she never saw a complete screenplay. Dom DeLuise confessed he made up half his lines. Dean Martin just said whatever popped into his head. Director Hal Needam ran the shoot like a live stunt show, fast, loose, and unrehearsed. Some actors arrived without even knowing what scene they were filming. The goal wasn't perfection, it was laughter. If the crew cracked up, the take stayed. What audiences didn't realize was that they weren't watching a polished Hollywood product. They were watching chaos, barely held together by cameras and tape. 12. The blooper reel that changed cinema. When the credits rolled, the Cannonball Run didn't fade to black. It exploded into a blooper reel, missed lines, pratfalls, stunts gone wrong, and actors breaking into uncontrollable laughter. It felt raw, honest, and wildly entertaining. For Jackie Chan, it was a revelation. Inspired, he made blooper reels a permanent part of his own films, starting with Dragon Lord in 1982. For decades afterward, Chan's outtakes became a signature, showing audiences the blood, sweat, and mistakes behind the spectacle. What began as a throwaway idea on the Cannonball Run turned into a global tradition. It wasn't just an ending, it was the birth of a new way of showing the truth behind the screen. 13th, Dom DeLuise couldn't stop laughing. Dom DeLuise was supposed to be the bumbling sidekick, Captain Chaos. What he became was the heart of the movie. The reason? He couldn't stop breaking character, mid-line, mid-scene, sometimes mid-stunt. Dom collapsed into wheezing laughter. Bert Reynolds often rolled his eyes beside him, but Needam stopped reshooting. Why? Because the takes were funnier when Dom was cracking up. That laughter wasn't scripted, it was real, contagious, and unstoppable. What audiences didn't know was that DeLuise's constant corpsing forced the crew to adjust the film around him. Instead of being cut out, it became the joke itself. He wasn't ruining the film, he was rewriting its comedic DNA. 14. Hal Needam bet. His Ferrari on the movie directors usually guard their sets and keep their personal lives separate. Not Hal Needam. The sleek red Ferrari 308 GTS that Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. drove on screen? It was Hal's personal car. No insurance waiver, no backup vehicle, just a simple instruction. Don't wreck it. They almost did. Burned tires, scraped doors, and one hair-raising scene nearly put the Ferrari into a guardrail. But Hal never pulled the keys. He believed the movie had to feel real. That meant trusting actors with his pride and joy. What audiences didn't see was a director literally betting his own wheels on the chaos. It wasn't a studio car, it was his life on the line, one reckless turn at a time. 15. The Bond that became a video game. For some fans, the Cannonball Run was more than just a movie. It was the spark that ignited an arcade revolution. In 1986, Japanese designer Yu Suzuki saw the film and envisioned freedom, the open road, and a Ferrari cutting through endless highways. The result was Outrun, one of the most iconic arcade racers in history. No laps, no trophies, just speed, music, and escape. Every spin of that plastic wheel was a direct descendant of the Cannonball Run. What audiences didn't know was that a chaotic car comedy from Hollywood helped define video game culture worldwide. It wasn't just a film, it was the DNA of a digital dream that still lives in arcades today. 16. Don Rickles was supposed to steal the show. The wisecracking priest role wasn't written for Sammy Davis Jr. It was meant for insult comedy legend Don Rickles. He was cast, ready, and perfect for the tone. Then he suddenly dropped out. Some blame scheduling conflicts, others whisper creative clashes. Whatever the reason, the producers scrambled. Sammy Davis Jr. stepped in, and the role was transformed. His chemistry with Dean Martin turned a backup plan into gold. What audiences didn't realize was that one of the film's most iconic pairings almost never existed. It wasn't careful casting. It was a last-minute save that gave the movie its swagger. 17. Brock Yates lived his own legend. Brock Yates wasn't just the screenwriter, he was the outlaw who created the real Cannonball race. He even makes a cameo at the film's starting line, clipboard in hand, pretending to officiate. But Yates wasn't pretending. He had once raced across America in the same Dodge ambulance that later appeared in the movie. His wife in the back, a fake medical crew in the front, and cops on their tail. What audiences saw as slapstick comedy was Yates reliving his own rebellion. It wasn't fiction. It was the architect of chaos literally walking into his own myth. 18. Bert Reynolds' double snuck into the movie. Midway through the film, a speeding Lamborghini gets pulled over by a highway patrolman. Freeze the frame and the cop looks eerily familiar, almost like Bert Reynolds himself. But it wasn't him. It was Roy Tatum, his longtime stunt double. Tatum resembled Reynolds so closely that even the crew got confused. One producer reportedly gave him instructions for the next scene, thinking he was talking to Bert. What audiences thought was a background cameo was actually a hidden Easter egg, born from a doppelganger so convincing it fooled the set. Not Reynolds, but close enough to cause chaos. 19. The sequel was greenlit. Before the movie finished, Hollywood usually waits for box office results before ordering a sequel. Not this time. While the Cannonball Run was still filming, executives were already calling for Cannonball Run 2. The dailies had them laughing, test audiences were buzzing, and they saw dollar signs. Scripts weren't locked, scenes weren't edited, but none of that mattered. They wanted more. What audiences didn't know was that Cannonball Run 2 wasn't born from success. It was born from studio greed before the first film even wrapped. It wasn't a sequel of demand. It was a sequel of assumption. 20th. The real race was a protest, not a joke. Before it became Hollywood comedy, the Cannonball Run was a dangerous protest. In 1971, Brock Yates and Dan Gurney drove coast to coast in 35 hours and 54 minutes. No permits, no rules, just pure speed. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a middle finger to the government's new 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. By the time Needam turned it into a film, the real Cannonball had already become legend, drivers wearing disguises, using ambulances, and risking jail time. What audiences didn't realize was that this comedy had its roots in rebellion. Not fun and games, but a defiant act against authority. Bonus fact, the forgotten sequel. Nobody saw. Just when fans thought the madness ended, it didn't. In 1989, a film called Speed Zone quietly appeared in theaters. Marketed in some countries as Cannonball Run 3, it had no Bert Reynolds, no Dom DeLuise, and none of the original spark. Instead, it starred John Candy, Eugene Levy, and Brooke Shields. The result? A critical and commercial disaster so complete that most fans don't even know it exists. What audiences saw as the end of a franchise was actually a botched revival, buried by its own failure. It wasn't a finale. It was an embarrassment that history tried to erase. Closing reflection. The Cannonball Run wasn't just a racing comedy. It was a reckless experiment where real stunts collided with improvisation and chaos became the method. Behind the laughs were broken rules, broken cars, and sometimes broken lives. Yet somehow, the film survived and crossed the finish line as a cult classic. So, what about you? Which of these facts shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes secrets.